Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hello, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by, drum roll, Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media, and professional financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there is greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com. Well, I'm super excited about today.
You're always.
I am super excited. I'm just a happy person, and it's podcast day, so it makes me extra happy. But today we have Chris McLellan, who is a data ownership advocate and community organizer who specializes in the advancement of leading edge innovations, particularly data-centric technologies. A veteran of startup life, he has led growth teams in Europe, the US, and Canada at ventures backed by the likes of Sequoia and Sir Richard Branson. And in 2017, he founded Ask AI, a podcast and free event series focused on artificial intelligence. And in 2019, he joined the Data Collaboration Alliance as Director of Operations, a nonprofit dedicated to meaningful data ownership and global collaborative intelligence. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Well, so much to cover today. I'm really, really excited. We always start with understanding how you found your way here. And I don't get to say Sir Richard Branson too often. So it has to kind of include a little stop in with that part on the journey.
Well, that's part of the hashtag startup life, part of my bio, where I was a growth manager at a company called Halo, which was backed by Sir Richard Branson. That was like a taxi app where, you know, it was very good. We expanded to thousands of drivers globally and dozens of metropolitan markets around the world, but eventually came up face to face with Uber, who kind of changed some of the ground rules of startup life at that time by raising incredible sums of money, which were, I guess, you know, were may even still be somewhat unprecedented amounts of money. And but it was a great adventure. Learned a ton. Learned a lot about. It was another marketplace, and that's a big part of what I've always been involved with in digital technologies. And you learn a lot about the dynamics of marketplaces, whether it's e-commerce or taxi drivers and passengers, or even data for that matter. So Sir Richard Branson was a backer of that. But I guess that speaks a bit to my journey. You know, I have been involved in startups of various types, consumer business for many years. And my path towards the Data Collaboration Alliance and my passion for data ownership really started with that podcast we mentioned called Ask AI, which as a growth marketer, I was looking around seeing increasing automation of what I was doing for a living. And I was like, are the robots going to take over the way I earn my bread in 10 years? And so I started to look look more into it. And the underlying technologies being AI, ML related, I thought, well, it's probably wise for me to learn more about that. And so I started to do meetups back when those were a thing, you know, in sort of 2015, 2016. A few people in a room. I sort of started with the marketing sector and said, you know, there's an increasing amount of automation. Are you aware of this? Let's get together and get some speakers here to tell us what this artificial intelligence stuff is all about. That basically grew and grew and grew to the point where I launched a podcast, and the events grew to hundreds of people, mainly in Toronto. but online as well. We live stream. And so that led me to more and more knowledge and understanding of the world of data management. And one thing that came really clear out of that was that the challenge of artificial intelligence and machine learning is for sure algorithmic development. There's no question we need to make smart algorithms. But at the same time, feeding those algorithms with data is actually the don't pass go, don't collect $200 moment. And so where are these companies going to get that data from? Well, they can create synthetic data, they can buy it, they can take it from like a fire hose from Twitter. But to get the really good stuff, let's say personal healthcare data and personal information, they're going to have to get that, source that from partners or individuals. And then you're like, okay, so what's the problem there? People aren't going to share their private healthcare, mental health, insurance, driving, et cetera, data with some app developer doing AI. And so that led me to think, so how could you share data without making copies? And because that seems to be the trick here, like people, how could you share data without losing control of it? And, I did a lot of looking up in a thesaurus about what the right word for that is. And it's collaboration. Collaboration is a form of sharing where you don't give up agency of the thing you put in. So if you're collaborating on a song, you're not walking away. It's two people or more people or multiple people collaborating toward the same outcome. And that's very different than cooperation, which might mean sharing resources, but for two different outcomes. And so I was like, okay, so it's collaboration seems to be the engine of what could make AI become a growth sector. And then I started looking around. So who's supporting data collaboration? And I discovered only one Twitter feed in the world that mentioned it. Who later turned out to be my employer. Fast forward turned out to be the sponsor and help me launch the Data Collaboration Alliance. So that's my origin story of how I came about to focus on data collaboration, data privacy, data ownership.
Love stories like this. And I think your nuanced word of collaboration versus cooperation is really important. I know you've seen that in different areas that you had, in the concept of public versus private collaboration, things along those lines.
Yeah, I think I've seen it kind of with the public government and the private sector collaborating on threat intel from a cybersecurity perspective. That's really the ideal of collaboration, but sometimes that's been a challenge. So, Chris, can you tell us a little bit more about the Data Collaboration Alliance?
Well, sure. So maybe just dive a little bit more into what we mean by collaboration there and some of the forces at work in all of this. So it's our worldview that the privacy when it comes to data is really largely about control. Who can see my data? Who can access my data? How are they going to use my data? And excuse me. So if you think about control, what's the opposite of control? Well, it's chaos. And so how would you describe the world of data today? I think it might be fair to say that it's better described by chaos than control. And why is that? It's not all simply just malicious actors doing bad things. It's really how technology is built. And there's two sort of engines of chaos, I sometimes refer to them. And so one is is data silos. So an app for everything. 40 years later of that ethos, we have millions and millions of silos of information, everything from spreadsheets to app-specific databases and everything in between, including sort of attempts to aggregate those silos into data warehouses and data lakes and stuff like that. And then the other engine of chaos is really copies, which is the other side of the coin from silos, because once as an organization or an ecosystem you've established management of data in silos, you have to then connect those silos somehow. And that's generally done through a process known as data integration, which is another way of saying copies. And that is not only a huge tax on innovation, like data integration can take 30, 40, 50% of any IT project, but it erodes the access controls on data. So if control of access was set on app 1, by the time you get to integrated app 25, the odds of the access control set by the original owner being persisted through to app 25 are very slim. And furthermore, even if that was able to be audited and detected, the app number, whatever I said, 25, could be in another jurisdiction entirely outside of the original application where the data was collected. So that's the chaos we're looking at. And so as far as the Data Collaboration Alliance goes, that's the problem we're trying to tackle. So we treat data ownership similar from a paradigm point of view to money. So if you think about how societies control other things of value, like identity cards or intellectual property or currency, they make it difficult, if not impossible, to copy. And that's exactly the principle that we're working at the Data Collaboration Alliance to introduce to data, and it can work for data too.
So that's really interesting. Can you expand upon that a little bit? So if I'm a company and I want to employ some type of AI to solve some type of problem, and I come and say, well, I'd like to hear more about what you all are doing and how how can I help? How can you help me? What does that look like?
So the inspiration for the solution is so often the case is really close to home and right before us all along, and it's from nature and evolution, and it's right between our ears, and it's the brain. So if you think about the brain, it's really a network of information. It doesn't make silos and copies of information. It interconnects it all. So you can use the same concept, let's say, of a carrot to come up with unlimited variations and ideas and ways to operationalize, if you will, the data that is the carrot. So there's an emerging pack of technologies and vendors that are using the principle of this network-based architecture and other capabilities to enable data to be connected and not siloed. And that's really one of the main inspirations behind the Alliance, is to advance, accelerate, support, do pilot projects that demonstrate that innovation does not have to come at the expense of data ownership. In fact, it's quite the opposite. If you give people agency and control of the information, they're more inclined to want to collaborate on their data. And so it's actually an agent of acceleration of innovation, which is amazing. So the innovation and ownership are not enemies. In fact, they're best friends.
So Chris, knowing that you have a big interest in Web3, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the privacy challenges? Like, one example I can think of is, how do you balance privacy when it comes to digital wallets versus knowing that maybe somebody from an OFAC country or a person, cyber criminal, is using a wallet? And how do we start to balance those things out?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm one of the projects we're doing, the Data Collaboration Alliance, is called the Collaborative Intelligence Network, which is or CIN, or SIN for short. And it's really a research initiative where we're trying to look into the basis of Web 3.0 and how it can be advanced and move forward. And because today, I think most people would probably describe Web 3.0 as a purely blockchain-based entity. There should be debate about that, because it's our view that blockchain is just one of multiple technologies that need to come into play here to advance, that future web that we all want and deserve. And so there's many technologies that come into play, as I said. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is to support that through, we do interviews with thought leaders. We have a blueprint doc that's an open Google Doc where people can contribute ideas. And we're actually doing through our community and other efforts, creating nodes, if you will, in a future global network of owned and where data ownership is preserved and data collaboration is enhanced. And so I'm conscious that I'm not specifically answering either of your questions a little bit, because it's hard to get specific use cases in the time we have. But maybe, Jody, could you go back with that in context now, and maybe ask your question again? So, because I've lost the thread a little bit.
I'm going to pass it back to him, because he was the asker.
Well, I think, Chris, part of what I think is happening with Web3 is, once again, the technology hare is outpacing the legal tortoise. And so Web3 is throwing off volumes of data. And so one of the things I'm trying to think through is, well, how do we balance privacy when it comes to your identity on the web, say through the digital wallet that you have, versus having controls in place so that you're able to identify if that wallet is being controlled by some type of cyber criminal who wants to engage in some kind of cyber mayhem. I don't know what the right balance is.
Yeah, and I think there are a ton of questions just like that that are open. But I guess to reapply our paradigm, that whatever the outcome of ownership, privacy, and control that's desired, and I think it's a high one, that reducing copies and silos is certainly going to be part of that mix. And so, what's good is a data wallet if that data is then copied, thousands of times in the process of supporting an outcome. So I think I would take the similar approach I do to Web 2.0, which is copies are the enemy of control. Silos are bad for control. So whatever we do, let's not try to repeat the mistakes of data fragmentation and data silos in Web 3.0 that we did in Web 2.0. And I think the dog agrees with me.
Yes, Basil would like to join the conversation. He sometimes makes a special guest appearance. What are you seeing from companies in terms of who needs to be at the table to be able to have these kinds of conversations and be able to move away from copies and silos, as you're talking about, and towards this idea of collaboration?
That's a good question. And if you look into organizations, particularly larger ones, public sector ones, traditionally, I suppose data governance, data privacy would be the domain of the legal minds or the CDOs or CISOs to some extent as well. But if we're looking to stem the tide, to fix future, to draw a line in the sand and say, look, the way the cause of the chaos is the silos and the copies, then we need to start to include in data privacy conversations the developers and the people responsible for accelerating new technologies within an organization. It's kind of like a case today where the IT team may be racing ahead, and even now citizen developers using low-code platforms are racing ahead, creating silo after silo of information, often customer information and sensitive data. And it's left to the CDOs and the compliance and the governance and the data protection teams to try to pick up the pieces. Whereas this conversation really needs to be held by all of these stakeholders right up front. And I think so what I'm seeing today is that those people aren't getting around the table as inclusively on that side as they should. What needs to happen is the application developers, the innovation teams, need to start to think about privacy from the very beginning and include the CDOs and data privacy lawyers and everyone else at the beginning. And of course, there's a well-known framework called Privacy by Design out there, and that certainly provides one methodology for approaching all that. And at the Data Collaboration Alliance, we're actually working on a new framework as well. It takes it a bit further, called zero copy integration, which is let's build our new app or our next IT project, but let's build it without silos or copies.
I would love to hear a little bit more about that. So can you kind of further explain what is in that zero copy framework?
Sure. So currently, it's in its third round of technical committee review through an organization that is called the CIO Strategy Council. They're an agent of the Standards Council of Canada, and with the current, I would estimate that it would be a national standard in Canada sometime around this summer. And so within that framework, what it does is articulate a few key elements for developing new technologies, new apps, new dashboards, new automations, new AI ML tools, new algorithms. And I think the essence of it is that it decouples the data from the application. So what it provides is an alternative to the application-specific database, and instead power multiple solutions from a network of information. And there's more information about this on our website at datacollaboration.org. But I think if there's one key takeaway about what this standard is offering the world of innovation. It's to decouple data from applications, because if we continue to embed data for each and every application as a silo, then the problems we discussed at the start are going to persist and get worse.
So is it fair to say, when you talk about zero copies, we're really talking about copying over data as little as possible and people working from the same set, because it limits the proliferation of this data everywhere, that creates challenges with securing it and things of that nature? Is that the best way to understand what we're talking about?
That's a great way to describe it, and it's a process. So zero copy integration is like, it's a way to intercept the projects you're going to do anyway and start building new apps, new systems, new dashboards in that way you describe, rather than trying to fix over time, you would seek to use those new solutions to decommission the old silos. So it's an evolution, not a revolution, for sure, as a framework. But I think the way you described it is really well, with one caveat, is that yes, you connect your legacy data into an environment, or network data environment. You could add net new data to this environment. But when it comes to build new solutions, as you described, what you're doing is creating, well, to use a fancy word, a transient data model. And that really mimics the plasticity functionality of the brain. So you can use one set of physical data to produce hundreds of data models from the same physical data without making a copy of it. And those models can be used to produce an API to power the experience, to put it a very, very fast way. But it's fascinating, and we hope to be a big part of the future of how Web 3.0 and applications will be developed in the future, because it preserves the access controls, the ownership.
I was literally about to ask around ownership. So it feels almost as if there's kind of this massive central home for data. And so my question is, well, who owns that? Who's responsible for, obviously, privacy laws, securing, you mentioned access controls, and then just this idea of, if I'm company A, but then I'm also company B, and it kind of goes into this almost little shared universe, whose data is it?
So it gets a little bit more nuanced. So imagine that environment I described as a node in a bigger network. And each node could be managed by an individual or an organization or a government agency. So they could be as small as a wallet, to take our previous reference, or as large as what currently, to run an entire organization. The key is that each node, the data owner or owners within each node, has full control of their information. And that's what our infrastructure project is all about, is like, how would these nodes connect to each other to create, kind of like how society works. Like, us three all have our own individual brains, and yet we're collaborating on this thing called a podcast right now. And we each have control over what we say. The only difference being, in the digital world that I'm proposing, is that I could actually delete what I said from the podcast. So I have the right to be forgotten, as it were, as well. But I don't have that in the podcast unless you gave me that, right? So that gives you a better sense of how this would work. So it's not a monolithic. It's not like there's one big brain in the sky. It's imagining a network of data management environments called nodes, of which there are millions potentially, and agency within each, but each can interconnect as well.
So in that interconnection, if we kind of think about, security and bad actors and things like that, would each company be in this concept, is each company responsible for the protection of it against all the other nodes?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why our hashtag for the Data Collaboration Alliance is access, not copies. And so what would actually, the engine of innovation would actually become not data sharing through copies or integration, but data sharing through granting access to my information, which would enable could expose my data via API to your node, your environment, and to contribute data to your solution that you may be hosting and building in your environment. But the access controls I set on the data are preserved in that API, and I can shut that API down at any time and withdraw my access to your environment. So this is comes back to our chat about Web 3.0, is, can blockchain weave into this ecosystem as the transactional manager of choice? Sure. And that's exactly what we're trying to do is figure out ways to, so the technology I was just describing happens to be called, a variation of it's called dataware. Tim Berners-Lee has something called the Solid Protocol, which your listener should check out. And he has a company called Inrupt. But these are all very similar in terms of they're trying to enable applications and digital solutions to be developed while giving data owners control. And that's what we share in common with those. And so I think it's a fascinating world. There's a lot of technologies at play here. And at the Collaboration Alliance, we're trying to live up to our own name and provide an environment for all these technology vendors to come together and trying to make sure there's at least interoperability moving forward between our solutions, and try to get around the table on a key outcomes, i.e., copies and silos are bad for data privacy and data ownership.
Excellent. Thank you for the additional explanation. I think really, really helpful.
So, as we ask all of our guests, based on your experience, what is your best privacy or security tip for our audience?
Well, at the risk of being a little self-indulgent here, would be to check us. We have a community at the Data Collaboration Alliance called Node Zero. So it's actually a bunch of professionals that love working on data. You could be a spreadsheet person or a database person or a data scientist even, that love working on data to solve problems. So the idea here is Node Zero. You log in, you get to experience the technology and the ideas I was just describing firsthand, but you do it while collaborating on data sets and building free tools for good causes. And one of our primary groups is the data privacy group. And they've done some amazing work that you can see at datacollaboration.org/community. They've done some amazing work creating something in beta we call the Data Privacy Gateway, which your listeners may be interested in checking out. So it's a whole bunch of tools for data privacy pros. But beyond that, as far as personal and individuals, what things they can do, it's a good question. I think one thing is in COVID and healthcare, when you think about privacy and you think about risk, I think about what can be weaponized against you now or in the future. And I always tell my friends, please don't, think about it before you share your COVID and vaccine related information. That's your personal private healthcare information. I know it's fun to say I didn't or I did get vaccinated and all that on Facebook or Twitter. But that goes into an environment over which you have no control how that information will be packaged up, sold, and used. And it can be in healthcare above most data, including political data, but can be weaponized against you in the future. And so, you don't want to curtail people's free speech and right to express opinions in a respectful way. But healthcare data, do your friends really, does social media really need to know your healthcare data? I would suggest probably not. And that's one thing I always ask my friends to think about.
I think that's very, very good advice. Now, when you're not giving such advice and creating collaboration alliances, what do you like to do for fun?
Well, I lived in the UK for 18 years in London. And so that was just a beautiful place to see the world from, because everything I wanted to see growing up as a kid was like an hour or 2-hour flight away. And so I did it all. And so that was really, I travel for fun. And recently, of course, I've discovered the weekend, get in the car, get on the bike and just explore the local area, because that's been a more practical option. But now I am very keen to, buy some plane tickets this year. And so one of my itinerary is go to a wedding in Australia in the fall. So I'm really never been. That's one of those trip of a lifetime type of things for most North Americans, because it's so far away. But so I can't wait to resume travel. That's really what I do for fun. And where I live, I'm very privileged to live close to a couple of great cities like Chicago and Montreal and New York. And so you're never going to get bored of going to those places.
Australia is definitely on my bucket list. What a wonderful, wonderful place. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your great information and insights and helping to explain this new world. Where would be the best place for people to learn more and to connect with you?
For sure. It's at datacollaboration.org. And we have free partnerships, and you just hit the programs button at and the navigation. You'll see what we do. And visit that website. It's all kind of there. And people are free to reach out to me at chris@datacollaboration.org. And we're really excited about the partnerships. I mean, I'll just end with this. I've had 3 calls today about projects we might be able to support through our free software program for children. One with a household name global organization, and another that's a hospital in Australia, of all places, and another that's quite a large urban region in North America. And the reason why we're talking to these organizations is that, when you think about I often say to people, it's probably too late for us. My day, I've been sharing everything. Oh boy, Facebook came out, Twitter's out, and I've been at it for quite a long time. And so my digital footprint is pretty expansive and all over the place and copied to the kingdom come. But for children, they still have a long digital future ahead of them. And so it's projects like that get me really excited, is that if we can build a better future for them now, what could be better than that, because there's still hope for their data to be less copied and siloed.
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of our kids, thank you for all the great work that you're doing. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Chris.
Thank you so much. I've been a fan of your podcast for a while, and you guys do a great job. So keep doing what you're doing.
Aw.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.